pops up that it is actually recording. Yes, it is. So I will give the floor to you, Hannah.
Perfect, thank you. So thanks again everyone for joining our third and final session. So today we're going to be talking about Engagement Studio. Can everybody see my screen, just to start with?
Yes, yeah. Yes, I can see it, yes.
Okay, so I'll start with the very basics of how we create an Engagement Studio through to what we can do within the actual studio. So I'll get going. And I've created an initial engagement studio here. I haven't actually done anything with it yet, but just so everyone knows, we go to marketing and then we go to engagement studio and it will bring us to this window here, and then we can literally just add an engagement program and that will take us to this window here. So we begin with just literally a start and an end, and we have 3 tabs at the top. So we've got the build section, we've got the test section. The report section will only become available once the Engagement Studio is live. And at that point, the build section will no longer be available unless we pause the Engagement Studio. And then we've got an activity section. So I will begin here at the start, and we need to give the Engagement Studio a name. We can pop it in any relevant folder. We can give it a description here, so this is just useful for other users just to know what the Engagement Studio is for, if it's for any particular campaign, etc. This is where we can add our... Sorry, I think my computer is frozen. That's not helpful. I'll just... Oh, there we go. It's woken up now, apologies. So recipient list is... I'm so sorry, I don't know if it's the internet connection. Just going to stop sharing and try and reshare again. Apologies, it was all fine earlier when I was in here. I think it's the heat, computer doesn't like the heat.
Yeah, computers have problems with heat at summer days as well.
This is very odd. Sorry, it's actually not. I'm going to log out and then log back in again and see if that helps.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about this, guys.
Mm-hmm. I can also see a text message chat in the chat from Melissa. She has the same problem. Whenever I click on list, I need to wait a few seconds until I can type in the fields.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I also remember that it does take some time. But
right, okay, maybe it's. I mean, that's more of a delay than normal, so it might be something that needs to be looked at. But let me I'll go back in again. I think it's.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just be more patient. So it has frozen again. Sorry. Right, okay, I'm going to join back in. Okay.
Yes, your screen shows up again.
Wait for the drop down.
Mhm.
Hopefully the rest will be a lot quicker than this. So basically we will then see a recipient list drop down, so we can search for a list that we know the name of, and we can add them as recipients to this engagement studio. Then the same, I'm not going to click the drop down, but the suppression list acts in the same way. Whereas the recipient list obviously we're sending to, the suppression list is anyone we don't want to actually send to. This is actually really useful if within the engagement studio we reach certain criteria and we say, okay, actually this person is now marketing qualified lead and we don't want them in the engagement studio. We can add them to a static list via the engagement studio, and if that static list is a suppression list, it will remove them. So that's actually quite a nice way of managing that. And then obviously we might have other engagement studios where they take more of a priority than this one. So we could say while they're in that list, we could add them to a static list. That could be a suppression list. Then when we get to the end of the other engagement studio, we have a stage that says remove from list, which would then mean they could then enter this engagement studio. So we get quite a bit of control over that with the lists. Then we've got this option here to send emails during business hours only. With B2B, obviously this is really useful. Generally, we would say to use this. There are some occasions, like there have been studies recently for things like surveys or NPS scores. It can be a good idea to send actually earlier in the day than the normal business hours, because it's the first thing someone will come into. So there are some exceptions to the rule, but generally Tuesday to Thursday, from my experience, has been really good with B2B. So we can literally choose to do Tuesday to Thursday if we know historically that Monday and Friday are not really ideal send days for email. And then we can choose our start time and our end time. So if somebody enters, say at midnight, on the website, they're downloading content, they've entered into the engagement studio, they wouldn't receive the email, the first email or the first action. That wouldn't actually occur until 10 a.m. the next morning. So that's how that works. Then we've got this really useful time zone selector, where we can choose this dependent on the lists and the segment that we're actually sending to. And we can also allow prospects to enter the program more than once. So we can say, okay, they can re-enter, but we don't want them to re-enter for at least 30 days. So we would just update that there. We can limit the program entries. So we might say, okay, yes, they can enter within 30 days, but we only actually want them to run through twice. So we can limit total entries to twice. And then if I just save that, that would be the criteria, the sending criteria and the times and everything. So we can get into the juicy bit now, which is the actual journey, which is the exciting
One question.
bit. Yeah, of course.
Why is there an example why you want to have someone to enter the program more than once?
So
for now, we mostly click on that we don't want to enter them more than once, but could be a reason, maybe a valid reason.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of an example of where, so say for example, we want to send an anniversary email. So you became a customer on this day, and every year we want to say it's your anniversary, then we might want them to continue to re-enter the program. So there are different scenarios. Generally, more often than not, people don't re-enter, but there can be times where we want them to.
Yeah.
And so it becomes useful then.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll go through each individual action trigger and rule first, and then we can start to build out an actual engagement studio. So within actions, there's so much that we can do. We can add to a list. We can add to a Salesforce campaign, adjust score, apply tags, assign to a group, assign to a Salesforce queue, assign to a user. We can also assign to a Salesforce active assignment rule, which is quite useful. Change the prospect's field values. We can create Salesforce tasks, notify users, remove from lists, remove tags, and obviously we can send an email, which is not the most important one, but that's obviously what we build the engagement studio around. And then triggers, we have custom redirect link, email click, we've got email opens, file downloads, forms, form handlers, and landing pages. So basically, the action is something that we are going to do. The trigger is we're listening for the prospect to have done something on their end. So they've engaged with a form, they've opened an email. The email open, it's worth bearing in mind, that only counts for emails that have been opened within this engagement studio. So we can't necessarily pick emails from outside of this studio. There are ways that we can get around that by, if we have a completion action, say on a list email, we have a completion action that says add to a list. We could then look for that list. So if they've opened it, they're on the list, and we can say, are they on this list? So there are different ways around it. And then we've got rules. So assigned to a Salesforce queue, assigned user, assignment status grade, list, Pardot campaign, prospect custom field, prospect default field, prospect email status, tag, and then we've got the campaign and campaign status for Salesforce, and also Salesforce status, and then score. So the rules are obviously criteria based on the prospect's data and things that we have, information that we have on them. So what I will do, I'll go through individually again now, and I'll just show you what we can do within each stage, and then we can start to build out an engagement studio after that. So if we wanted to say add to list, I'm going to take ages to drop down again now. So that would drop down. We could, there we go. We can choose the list that we want to add them to, and then we can say immediately, or we can wait to add them to the list. So the wait stages are always in days, they're never less than a day, or we can do immediately. So then we have add to Salesforce campaign. Now this one's really useful throughout the whole program. As an initial stage, we can say, okay, we want to add them to a Salesforce campaign, but we want to add them with a status of joined. So that will then add them to the campaign, and we know they've joined. Then as they go through the program, if they open an email or if they click an email, whichever one we want to monitor, we can say add them to the Salesforce campaign with a status of active. So we now know they've been active within that particular campaign. We can then continue if they have reached a certain score. We can say, okay, we now know that this prospect is a marketing qualified lead. So we can again add a status to change them to marketing qualified lead. That can then notify sales that they need to be followed up. And it can also be a trigger to remove them from this engagement studio, because if, for example, it's a new lead nurture program, we've now nurtured them, we've got them to that marketing qualified lead status, and it's now going to move on to sales to actually follow that through with opportunities, etc. So we wouldn't necessarily want them to stay in the actual program. And again, we can do this immediately, or we can wait. So we can
One question about this one.
Yeah, of course.
Just as an example, now we are adding people to Salesforce campaigns, and then specified also in which email they, well, sort of are. So if they got the first email and they opened something there or clicked something there, then we have a specific Salesforce campaign, not in every area probably, but we have some specific Salesforce campaigns with the name of that first or second or third email in the Engagement Studio. Is it, what are your ideas about that? To have all those different campaigns for each type of email in Engagement Studio, so sales can see where people are at in an Engagement Studio, or do you have other ideas or approaches there?
I mean, in terms of if people have opened, ideally we would be using the email report for that. If we wanted to do anything with those people, we could just go to the email report and we could pull a list from there. So I think it would probably be a little bit overkill to have a campaign for every email. If we have a campaign for the overall Engagement Studio and any other assets that fall into that, we can then control everything by that main campaign. So yeah, unless we have, say we have a newsletter email that's not to do with Engagement Studio, if that's a list email, we might have an overarching newsletter campaign. But if it's part of an Engagement Studio that's an overarching campaign, it would probably be better to keep everything within that. We can, of course, have child campaigns. So we could have the overarching campaign and then the emails could be child campaigns within that. But again, that would potentially be a little bit too granular. It depends on what we actually want to do with those people that have clicked and opened. The standard would be, if they've opened or clicked and we want to monitor that, would be either to add them to a list and then follow with that.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so then moving on to adjust score. This one again is really useful because we can either look at the overall score, or if we have a scoring category, we can adjust the individual scoring category. So again, talking about the campaigns, if we have a particular, it's a big campaign and we're really wanting to focus on, say, lead nurture, we might have a lead nurture scoring category, and once they reach a certain threshold within that category, we're going to say, okay, they are actually qualified. So it depends on what the Engagement Studio is for, but so we can have overall score or scoring category, and then we can say by how much. So if they've opened an email, we might just want to adjust that scoring category by 1 or 2. A click, we might want to increase to maybe 5. We can actually specify specific clicks, which I will get to shortly. So we might say, I'll talk about that when we go through the clicks actually, because it might confuse things. And so we say by plus or minus. So if they do something that shows a negative sort of action, so maybe they've been inactive, we might want to reduce their score again. Then we've got immediately or wait. So we have these on the majority of steps. So we can apply tags. So this is literally as simple as, like we were adding to a list, we can add a tag. And again, we can add in the wait step. Then we can assign to a group. So this is where we might have a Salesforce round robin group, and we can assign the prospect to that group, and Salesforce will then take that from there, and that can be used then for follow-up. We have assigned to a Salesforce queue. So again, this is when we're working with queues. We might have one person with their own queue, or we might have a team that are associated to a queue. But we would just choose the queue here, and again, we would select. They could then follow that up. And we can assign to a specific user. So again, if we've got somebody in sales potentially that's looking after leads for a particular campaign, we can actually notify them individually, and they will then know that someone has either opened an email or they've reached a certain threshold, all that good stuff that we can look at there. Then we have assign via active assignment rules. So if we've got Salesforce active assignment rules set up, we can assign them to this, and again, Salesforce will carry on the processes that it does in the background. We have change prospect field value. So we can choose which field we want to change, whether we want to change it or whether we actually just want to clear it out so it's actually empty. And then we can say what we want to change it to. And again, we've got the wait step. So this might be useful if, say, if someone's clicked a particular link and they've got an interest in something, we might then say, oh, actually, they've got an interest in this particular field, so we actually want to change this field to this value. So again, that's quite useful. As you can see, there's a lot that we can actually do. So we can create Salesforce tasks as well. So this is quite good because we can add comments in. So we can say a subject line, we can assign it to the assigned user or a specific person again. We can give it a priority. So if a lead is just maybe warm and might need some sort of follow-up, so if they've clicked a form but they haven't filled it in, we might think, oh, actually, maybe sales can come in here and move that along. So we could say maybe priority medium, excuse me, status of where they are. Then we've got due, so we can give it a due date and a reminder. So if it's not been acted upon, we can remind them to act on it. And here we can just enter comments as to prospect has reached form but not completed it, so please follow up. And we can add in a wait step.
Something I would like to add here, because it starts with assigned to assigned user. So if we add this to a specific engagement studio, one step before I would add assign to and then the specific group or the specific user in sales where you want it to be assigned to make sure that the correct person or group is assigned before the Salesforce task will be triggered, right?
Yeah, so assigned user, that would be the the person that is actually assigned to that prospect, or we can do a specific person. Yeah. So in this situation, we wouldn't be able to assign it to a group. It is just to an individual.
Okay, yeah, because I know when we have used this, that those Salesforce tasks, they aren't always triggered. Probably because the assigned user isn't not always in place anymore or isn't the correct one. So therefore I thought it could be helpful to first add the person you want to assign it to and then add that step. Salesforce task can also add, for example, a notification email step to be sure that emails will be triggered to the assigned user. Is it correct or?
From within here, is that?
Within an engagement studio, for example, yes, because you have different steps you can add, and you want to make sure that the assignment goes well, and that also, for example, the Salesforce task will be triggered.
Yes, I see what you mean. So we can just go back, frozen again. So where we have the assign to user step, if we wanted to use the Salesforce task and make sure that they were actually assigned, we could assign them here. This is we can only choose one person here. But if we've done this step as a prior to the task, we know they're definitely assigned, and that should avoid any disconnect or sync errors with Salesforce.
And you can also start, for example, assign to group, and then add after that the Salesforce task.
Yeah, so assigned to group, I'll need to double check that one, because assigned to user is usually a Pardot user, because basically we've obviously got Salesforce users and Pardot users, but if a prospect isn't assigned to a Pardot user, that's where we'll get sync errors. So assigning to a group is actually a Salesforce group, not a Pardot group. So if we assign to a group and they still weren't assigned to a user, we may still see those sync errors.
Okay.
So I can put a bit more about that in the documentation, if that will help, just to detail that out. Yeah.
Yes, that would be nice. Yeah.
No problem. Just making a note of that. So sorry, I'm losing my voice. So then we can notify a user. So again, we can just select who we want to notify. We can remove from list and remove tags, just the reverse of what we had earlier. And then we've obviously got send email, which when we start to build out the engagement studio, I'll go into that one. So triggers, we have a custom redirect link click. So we can say, have they clicked any, or have they clicked a specific custom redirect? And then if they have, we can say, we want to wait up to however long to see if they have, and we can move on from there. Email link click is the same. It'll wake up in a second, sorry. Oh, it's because I haven't got an email template in there yet, so I will show that when we put an email template in. And the same with email. So as I was saying earlier, we can only look for emails that have been opened within the engagement studio. So we will look at that shortly. We can look for if a file has been downloaded, so any files or a specific file, and we can add the wait step. We can look to see if a form has been completed. We can say any or specific, or if it was just viewed. And then we've got the same form handler, any or specific. Obviously, we can't track if that's viewed because the form handler will be on a third-party site, or the it's not on a Pardot landing page, so we can't actually necessarily track that through the form handler. And then landing page, any or specific, and was it completed or viewed? And that's all of the triggers. Then we've got rules. So assign Salesforce queue. So we're looking to see if it's assigned to a particular queue. Here we can start to add conditions. So we can say assign to a queue and their assigned user is, and we can continue to build out these conditions, so we can build more complex rules. It's not just that first initial rule that we're looking at. So if we go back, we've got assignment status. So we can add a condition. So we're saying, are they assigned? And then we can add a condition into there. Then we can look at grade. So grading, I'll just quickly cover, is how interested we are in the customer. So we're looking at maybe the type of industry, the job title, lots of different factors as to how interested we are with them. So if we're using grading, we can say the grade is, or so we might only want grade A, or we might want B and above. So we can basically use these different filters to look at those different grades. So it's A+ right through to F. And again, we can add on a condition, so we can build out these more complex rules, and that helps us. We don't have to build as many steps in the engagement studio, so it keeps it nice and neat and tidy. So we can look to see if they're on a list, and I don't know why I keep pressing this click down because I know it's going to take ages. So are they on a list? This can be any list. It doesn't have to be a static list. So it can be static or dynamic. and we can add conditions and evaluate when. Then we can look for Pardot campaign. So literally, are they on that particular campaign? We have custom field. So we're going to say, okay, additional details contains, say, I mean, the ideal fields that we would use for this would be drop-down fields or checkboxes or radio buttons, just because we know that the data is more accurate. If we use a free text field, we do run the risk of spelling errors. So if we're going to say contains and someone, say for example, we say contains US and someone's written United States, it's not going to pull them through. So ideally we do want to be using drop downs and radio and checkboxes where possible. And so it's the same with the default field, same options there. And we have prospect email status. So this is if they've opted out or if they're set to do not email. So if they are opted out or set to do not email, they won't receive emails anyway as they're running through. They'll still run through the engagement studio, but they actually won't receive any emails. So it's potentially best practice to actually have a list at the beginning that rules those people out, so they're not running through the engagement studio and skewing the figures. So they would ideally be in the suppression list. Then we've got prospect tag. So is the tag, and we can search for tags here to see if they're tagged with a particular one. And we have Salesforce campaign. So are they on a particular campaign? And campaign status. So this is where we can again delve into the campaign. So we can say, are they on a campaign and is their status active? And if so, we can then start to potentially look, for example, if we've sent email 1, they've clicked it, so we've actually said, okay, they're now active on that campaign. We might then want to send a different type of communication to the one that we would send to those that are inactive, or we might want to send it sooner. So we could potentially branch out and say, we're going to wait 2-3 days for this person because they're active and they're more engaged, but we might give this other person a little bit more time and nurture them in a different way. And then we've got Salesforce status. So this is, are they a lead, contact, or deleted? And the score. So this is how interested the prospect is in us. So we can look at overall score or scoring category, and we can look to see is greater than, is less than, etc., and move them on in the journey dependent on where their score is. So again, we can use that to change the journey if we want to speed it up, slow it down, or change messaging dependent on if a particular scoring category is really high, we might want to really focus on that category, because the scoring categories will look outside of the engagement studio, so all the activity that's going on in the whole of Pardot. So what we'll do is everyone okay for, and just what I'm going to do now is start to build out an actual engagement studio. So I don't know if anyone wants to ask any questions or if anyone wants to go and get a drink or anything. Just realised how long I've been talking for, sorry. Don't want to bore people to death.
No, for me, it's fine. If someone has questions, just go ahead, of course, but yes, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So what we would generally advise is never start with a trigger, really, because we want to give people time to have actually done things. And generally, what we can do is start with adding to the Salesforce campaign. So we can say, I don't know if there's going to be a test one in here. No. just go with this one for now. Obviously, we're not going to make anything live, so we won't. And then this here with the status is dictated within Salesforce, so we can actually change the statuses for each campaign. I'll just show an example of one that we have. So this is a MarCloud campaign. I'll just zoom out a little because that's quite blurry. So basically we offer a free Pardot review, and we're looking at scoring category here, and we're adjusting the scoring category dependent on basically what we're saying here is they've requested a free review. We're going to adjust the scoring category, and then we're going to send an email, and this is the example I wanted to give. We're basically going to say we're going to now add them to the Salesforce campaign as connected because we've connected with them. And so these statuses literally can be anything we want them to be, but generally we would say we'd use sort of active. So we could use joined or sent. We can use active. Then we would move on to marketing qualified lead. Then we can move on to sales qualified lead, which we wouldn't necessarily assign through an engagement studio. We might assign that through an automation rule separately. And then we can also use inactive, which is really useful if someone has gone right through the engagement studio. If it's a re-engagement campaign, so the lead has been cold for quite some time, we're trying to re-engage them. They've gone through the whole campaign, they've not done anything. At the very end of that campaign, we can say, okay, we're going to set them to inactive, and then we can decide if we want to actually move them to the recycle bin, so that we're keeping the prospect data clean and we're not actually emailing people that don't want to receive emails. So that helps with our deliverability score and the overall picture. So yeah, that was a very long-winded way of saying that we can have different statuses here. So we might say, okay, we're going to set this to sent, and we're going to do it immediately because they've just entered the campaign and we don't actually need to wait for anything. So let's save that. Then
one thing to add here.
Yes.
If we, in this example, pick send, but we don't have the email sent yet. Yeah, it's a small thing, but isn't it a good idea to add that step that emails has been sent? That is added after we first add the step send an email.
Yes. So I was trying to use this as an example as they've joined the campaign. So I've confused it there. Sorry. So yeah, if they've filled in a form to request a download, maybe we might say, okay, this is the campaign for downloads, and we've only got sent and responded here, but we might want to change that to joined.
Exactly.
And so we know that they've actually joined the campaign. But yes, once we've then sent the email, we would then change that to sent after we'd actually sent it. So we might, because the reason we've got the sorry.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's a small thing, but I think it's good to do it like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely really important, that one. And if the reason we've got the join step is because we might now say, okay, we're going to look for a rule to see if, for example, the grade is, we're going to say the grade is less than, let's say, B, for just as an example. If that's the level that we're looking at, we can save that. It makes up. Then we can say, okay, if it's not, actually we're not necessarily interested in these people, so we're going to send them down this route. We know they've joined, but they must be less than a B, so they'll still stay as the campaign they've joined, so we know they've downloaded that, but they're not the grade that we would actually be looking at, so they're not as high importance as those that are above that grade, if that makes sense. So then we would look at, okay, we want to send an email. And we'll choose, I don't know if we've got a test template, and we'll likely at this point send it immediately because we've run through those steps, and we can now go ahead and send it. So following that, we will want to follow up and see if, I personally would say we want to see if people have clicked, because opens can be quite debatable, but we might want to look for both. So we can say, okay, have they opened the email? And we're going to say, let's wait 3 days. I'd say 3 days on average is a decent time to wait to see if someone's actually opened an email. Majority of people will probably open within the first 24 hours. But if we wait 3 days, that gives everybody a chance. And I mean, we do have, there are times when people will open an email a year later, which is obviously, they must be clearing out their inbox or something. But we can wait up to 3 days on average. That should be enough time for everyone to have actually engaged with that email. So then we're saying, okay, if they haven't, we might want to actually resend that email. Now, this is a really good way of reusing that content because they haven't opened the email. But what we would advise is creating a duplicate template with a different subject line, because they've not opened it the first time. So let's try a new subject line and see if that actually generates any activity. So we'll pop in email, nope, wrong one, sorry. We'll pop in send email. And again, we'll send, I'll just pop in the test one there, but it might be FQA test template B, and we know then it's got a different subject line. And we can send that immediately because we've already waited 3 days. So then over on this side, I'm going to say, okay, they've opened, so have they actually clicked the email? And this is where I was saying earlier that we can look to see, it can be any link or a specific link. Now this is important because we might have lots of different content in the email template, and we might have social media links, we might have the logo, and potentially we're not as interested in them clicking that as we are the main call to action. So this can help us to see how interested they are with the content that they're seeing. And also if we have, for example, an email that has different industry links in there, we can say, okay, have they clicked this industry? So industry A, yes, we're going to send them a different email next time that's around that industry. So it helps us to start building up more of a picture of their interests. So if we were to say a specific link, it would give us the option of which link we want to choose. And then again, we can choose a wait time. Because we've already waited 3 days, we wouldn't necessarily wait any longer for the click. And if I just save that one, if I just go back to the wait step again, apologies, I skipped a step. So we've got up to maximum of 3 days, and we've got wait. So this is a hard wait. Generally, we would always use the hard wait step, just because there are some occasions where if we say up to a maximum of, Pardot can trigger things and activities can happen quicker than the engagement studio can catch up. So generally we would use the hard wait. So like I said, we've waited those 3 days. So within that time, we're going to say, have they clicked a specific link? If they have, we might say, okay, well, we know there was a form on that page. So have they completed the specific form that's on that page? Let's just say it's this one. For this one, we might want to wait because potentially they've clicked it within those first 3 days, but they might come back to the form. So we might say, okay, let's wait another 3 days to give them a chance to actually complete that form. If they have, we're going to say, well, actually, that's a really important form that they filled in. It shows that they're really interested in purchasing. So we're going to, I'm so sorry, my computer's not wanting to click things today, we're going to then say, okay, add them to the Salesforce campaign. And at this point, we might be able to say, add them as an MQL. And because we're saying, I'm just going to say that as is because we don't have those options, but we're saying add them to the campaign that we're looking at as an MQL. And because they're an MQL, we're actually going to end here because we've now nurtured them to that point that they're at the point of interest where sales can actually then take that and run with it from their end. So
one question here.
Of course.
Just to understand the waiting period.
Mm-hmm.
So in this example, when we send an email, we first wait 3 days to check if they open it or not. And as soon as they do that within those 3 days, at that moment, the Engagement Studio checks if someone has clicked on the specific link there.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't matter if it's 1 or 2 or 3 days. And at that moment, when the email has been opened, then at that moment the link will be the specific email link will be checked.
So
and after that has been done, then it will wait for 3 days again, right? To see if the form is completed.
For that particular example, if we wanted to say, okay, as soon as they carry out this action, say if it's after a day, we want to continue down the route that we want to go, that's where we would use the up to wait rather than the hard wait. So if we said wait up to a maximum of 3 days, if that person opened the email within a day, they would continue down that route. However, it will do it as soon as they've opened. So basically, if we say, okay, we're going to wait up to a maximum of 3 days and they've opened it, literally seconds later, we're going to look to see if they've clicked a specific link, but it might not give the prospect enough time to have opened it, click the link. So it might actually end up sending them down this route. So that's why we would normally choose up to 3 days, which does mean it will be a hard wait of up to 3 days, but it then means they will actually continue down the correct route.
So what if, for example, someone opens the email and submits the form in those first 3 days?
Mm-hmm. So within these 3 days?
Yeah, so what if, for example, the form completion action has been done in the first 3 days? Does Engagement Studio still measure that, or? Yes,
so as long as when we get to here, we've got to the 6-day stage. So if they've opened an email, clicked a specific link, and submitted the form within those 6 days, it will still send them here and add them to the Salesforce campaign. What we can do on the actual form, we can add, so separate to the Engagement Studio, we can add a completion action to actually add them to this campaign as well. And that would mean that we're not then waiting for them to go down all of these stages, wait until day 6 for sales to follow up.
Mm-hmm.
The Engagement Studio would still wait, but it wouldn't actually, it wouldn't mean that sales are delayed. So,
so the advice would be here to add and also that specific Salesforce campaign in a completion action for that specific form.
Yes, yeah, that would be the ideal. We can also look to say we'll have a suppression list that because the form has got that completion action, if we can have like a dynamic list that says if the Salesforce campaign status is MQL, that's a suppression list. That would mean they would come out and we wouldn't see the full reporting going through here. But it does mean that we know that they're an MQL and they've actually, we'll see that reporting on the Salesforce side. So there are lots of different ways we can use Engagement Studio, but generally with complete actions on forms, that would be the ideal. So we might even just say form completed and remove this step altogether if we want that particular completion action to be on the form. Because if for example, they've opened this on email, they've opened the email on day one, they've clicked, they've filled in the form, they've been really active. So within those 6 days, they've actually become a sales qualified lead. We then don't want to overwrite that with this. So if we are going to have the completion action on the form, we should remove it from the engagement studio. If that makes sense, we should only have it in one place. So
Okay.
it all depends on urgency, really. If we know at this stage actually this is really important and we want to act on it quickly, we'll put the completion action on the form and we'll remove it from here. But if it's not so urgent, we can then let them go through the journey.
Okay. And regarding the end step, at this moment we use engagement studios primarily ready to engage prospects and potential customers. So we have the idea that it's good to let people go through the program to nurture them with information, also because of the sales funnel. It's about at least 6 months that someone thinks about us and decides to go for us for certification or something. And to make sure that potential customers keep on have us on their mind. We want to make sure that they will get several insights or news items. So therefore we usually don't add an end button very soon in the program, but in the end, also to make sure that if we transfer someone to sales, that person has done enough and therefore is interested in us, and sales can have a good conversation.
Yes, yeah. So in this situation, so maybe if the form was, I don't know, request a demonstration or something like that, that's where we'd want to act on it quite quickly. And what we might do for the 6 month period, we might say, okay, we've actually got this is more of a immediate, we want. But then if this one hasn't worked, we're then going to move them to a different nurture program, which is over the 6 months, which is a bit more slower pace. So we can have those two running alongside each other, because we could even get to this point and add them to a list that adds them to that engagement studio. So we can say add to the list, that's a recipient list of that, and then that will continue to nurture them while sales are also working with them. The other alternative, if we want to continue them through the journey, is we look to see if they're a lead still, and if they've been converted to a contact, it's more than likely that sales are obviously a bit more advanced with them, because it's all about the messaging that we're wanting to give across. We want to make sure it's all really personalised to the stage that they're at. So we might not want to send the same communications to someone who is actively talking to sales as opposed to someone who isn't, but they're both at maybe the 3 month stage. So yeah, it can get quite in depth, and we can do lots of different things with different people dependent on where they are. But by all means, we don't have to put this end step in. It's just if we think, okay, well actually they are nurtured and we don't want them to continue with more generic messaging, we might want to send them something more specific, then they could then go into that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. So just going through here, so we're saying, okay, have they clicked a particular link? So if they have, we can then, dependent on what that link is. So if, for example, they've clicked a link that goes to the landing page for the form and they haven't completed the form, we might then want to send an email that acknowledges that. and it's along the lines of, are you short for time? You know, too busy to fill in a form. Obviously worded better than that. You know, get in touch with sales, and then we could maybe have a call to action that can open up an email for them to email sales, which could be pre-populated with subject line, content, etc. So it's just really quick for them to send an email to sales to show that they're interested. So it's just making life easier for the customer if they don't particularly want to fill in the form. But it also acknowledges that we know sort of what stage they're at without being too big brother. So we can then, like I say, send an email dependent on their actions. So I'm going to save that there. And so if they have opened and they haven't clicked anything, again, we might just say, okay, well, we're just going to wait until email 2 because they've opened, they're interested, but we're not sure what they're interested in. And then with this email here, which would be 1B as such, we would just follow the same process. Now, we can actually copy steps. So if we go to select, this does play up occasionally. So try and make sure that it doesn't. So we're going to select these 5 steps. We're going to copy. Yeah, it's telling me there's a problem. Let's remove the end step and copy. It has moments where it wants to and where it doesn't. So generally, it should normally copy these stages and we can then place them here. But at the moment, it's deciding not to. And because I've covered all stages, it could actually be because I'm not. If I copy that now, no. So I'm not actually sure why it does this. Sometimes it works, other times it doesn't. It's almost like it decides when it wants to, but when it does, it's amazing. If we've got quite a few steps, it will copy up to 10 steps, and we can then, if we have copied them, we can then go and paste them in here. So it gives us an option here. If we've copied them successfully, we can actually paste those steps in. So instead, I'm going to just quickly pop them in. So here we're obviously looking at this email template. Now, at this point, if we want to get really granular, we might also want to look, well, actually, have they also opened this? Because within this time, they might have actually since gone back and opened. So we're actually just going to pop a wait step in of 3 days. So if we said no, we might actually go, okay, but have they opened the one that we already sent to them? So imagine that's 1A. We've already waited here, so we don't need to wait again. So, and that just covers us for the 2 emails that they've actually received. So we know, because occasionally people will open after the 3 days, so it just gives us that backup. And then we can follow these exact same steps as we go along. We can add in if it's a specific email link, if a form was completed, etc. So say we've copied all of those and we've got down to this stage, and we can say, okay, we're now going to send email 2. Let's pretend this is email 2. So we're going to send email 2, and we might have different pieces of content. We might not be directing them to a form. So it all depends on what we're doing with this template as to what we want to monitor. But I actually, apologies, if they have clicked a specific link, we might also want to adjust their score. So if we've got a particular scoring category that we're looking at, we can say, well, we know they've opened an email, so they are interested in this particular area. We're going to adjust that by 1. So in the overall settings, we've got our scoring rules that they will still apply to the general scoring, whereas this will only apply to this scoring category. And we can say immediately, so we're just going to adjust their score by 1 within this category. Apologies, that was in the click side. I thought it was in the, I'm going backwards here, so this is a bit confusing. So actually we might want to change that score to 3 because it's actually a click, and we might want to change this here to adjust it by 1. So by this point they may have got 4 in the scoring category. Now we need to decide on a threshold within that category that we're happy with. They've taken all of these actions, it's resulted in this score, and if we get to this point here, so bearing in mind they could actually reach the form through other channels. So if we're running this campaign through social media, we've got a landing page on the form, we can look at the whole scoring category in general, and we can say, okay, is the score for the scoring category, is it greater than, let's just use an example of 50, and if so, actually are we saying they're actually now marketing qualified? So we might want to add them to Salesforce campaign as marketing qualified in here. And again, because they're marketing qualified, we probably would want to put an end step in there. So we now know, okay, they've been successful within this engagement studio or outside factors as well. They've reached that category, so we actually don't need to nurture them for this particular campaign. If they haven't reached that particular score, we can then continue to send emails, and we can just continue going through general steps and nurturing them and basically just continuing to monitor their activity. So there is actually an option to test the engagement studio, which is this tab here. And this is actually really useful because it's basically we take the journey ourselves and just test that if we take certain actions, is it going to behave in the way we expect it to? So we can begin the test, add it to the Salesforce campaign, and then we're looking to see if the grade is above or below. So we're going to say yes. The email is going to be sent, and then it's going to ask, was the template opened after 3 days? Let's say yes, it was. We've adjusted the scoring category by 1, and we're going to look to see if a specific link was clicked, and we're going to say yes, actually it was. So the scoring category is going to be adjusted by another 3, and then we're going to say, was this completed? Actually it wasn't. So we're going to send another email, and it will go on like that. So we would have the additional steps in here, which would slow it down getting to here. But if at any point we think, oh, actually that wasn't intended, like this, for example, it's gone straight down to here, we know we want to put in some extra steps, and just to slow that process down to see what they've done with this particular email. So that's actually really useful. We can start it over, go through. So when we've got a really big engagement studio, we can just do all the different processes and fully test that it's behaving as we expect it to.
One question about it.
Yeah, of course.
Because when you use that test, you can see some dates on the right side, and I also had some good questions from Louise Hollings, which couldn't join, but emailed me about some good questions.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is, once the engagement studio is running, is there a way to see when the next email will go out? Is, for example, in that case, before it's running, is it a good idea to use the test here, and when it's running, is there another idea?
Yeah, I mean, while it's running, that would be more looking at the figures throughout the actual engagement studio and seeing where people are. Obviously, if it's been running for a while and we've got a dynamic list, it's not going to be as obvious because people have been running through it and we're not going to know necessarily where they are. But yeah, definitely this test here would tell us, okay, because we've got the log that runs down the side when we're going through the test. It will tell us at what point we expect people to have reached certain stages. But yeah, unfortunately, while it's running, there isn't actually a way to know when the next one is due to go out. Okay. Without sort of delving into it. There's no easy way, shall we say.
Okay.
I've got a question. I'm sorry, Joe.
No, go ahead, Beth.
Okay. Say we have run an engagement studio and 99% of the people have completed it, but we have a new piece of content. Can we add an email after people have already run through the list?
Unfortunately not, no. So if they've reached that end step, we wouldn't be able to add anything. If we've started an engagement studio and we think actually we might actually want to add something at the end, but we're not quite sure yet, but we need to get it started, what we can do, if we go back to the build, we can add in a wait step towards the very end, and we can say wait 180 days, and then, you know, however many days we think are going to be sufficient for us to get that content in there. And then we can then add that in, and because people are waiting at that step and they haven't reached the end, they will then receive that email as long as it's after the wait step.
Okay, so we add that to the, can you show me where you would add the 180 days?
Yeah, of course. So it would be the very last step. So let's just say, for example, we've got, have they opened, and then we can say, I mean, we can actually use anything really, but obviously it needs to be something that's not relevant to this campaign, because I'm trying to think what would be the most generic. Even if we said, yeah, if we just said is prospect tag, I'm just gonna, I won't type anything in actually because that will create the tag, but is prospect tag, and we look for the tag, but we say wait, and we say 180 days. That's then going to wait, and we can say yes, no, it doesn't matter. We're still going to send the email here. Okay. So we don't do anything on the yes or no.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay.
I know we also have like a specific action so that you are waiting, right? I did find something some time ago, but maybe we can add that in the guidelines later on.
Which is that? Sorry,
Maybe it was related to a list as well, but I do remember I found a way to have like that waiting period, what you explained. So let's add that in the guidelines. I will search what I find, what I found, and then can do that. Yeah.
No problem.
I'm also conscious of time. I don't know if everyone wants to have like a 5-minute short break, and then we then continue after the break.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Then we'll meet in about 5 minutes.
Perfect. We'll see you shortly then.
Yes. Hello again. I'm back, so let me know when you're back as well.
Sure, I'm back. Everyone's ready. So.
Let's wait 1 minute or in case everyone responds. Then I know at 17 we have waited 5 minutes. So then let's see.
I've got the couple of engagement studios that you had queries on. So I've got those open. We also go through reporting using those because obviously they're running, so we can see the report tab. So that would be
good.
Useful.
And I also have some other questions here from Louise, but
perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yes. Let's start again.
Brilliant. Did you want to go through the questions from Louise first?
Yeah, it's a good idea, maybe. Then we don't forget them. First question is there any best practice on timing between emails sent within engagement studios?
Yeah, so I mean, 3 days roughly would be enough for, like, if we're looking just for an open, if we're looking for engagement with an email, and then general timings across the whole engagement studio will depend on the type of campaign it is. So if it's a new lead, a warm lead, or an inactive lead. So for a new lead, we might want to send more regular communications. Obviously they've just been introduced to us. We know they're interested because they've opted in for emails. So the fact that they've actually opted in for them, so we can send more regular communications. With inactive leads, if we want to do a re-engagement, we might want to increase the wait time, just so we're not overloading them and we're giving them that chance to warm up and actually come back and be an active prospect again. So it does differ, but I can pop some sort of general guidelines in the document if that will help.
Yeah, that would be great. I also believe it can be culture related based on how many times an email has been sent. Maybe in some countries it's useful to email quicker, and in other countries it's better to have a longer waiting time. If you're sending emails more quickly, it can also happen that the amount of prospects in your email list decline because they get too much emails and they want to opt out. So yeah, something to think of, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of it will come down to testing and experience from what we've sent previously. And if we do start to see opt-out rates increasing, we can then start to increase the wait time, sorry. So yeah, if it's a longer running campaign that's going to be going for some time, we can just monitor that over time and see how people are behaving with them. And we can see that from the actual email reports to see the different time. So I can show you that when we start looking at the reporting. From the email template, we can see different time periods. So we can say, okay, we would need to make a note of it. We'd need to have a running document alongside it, but we can say we know from this period to this period we were sending with this wait step, and this is the result. And then we change that wait step, and this is now the result. So yeah, a lot of it can be sort of information that's built up over time.
Okay. And another question, it's also related to the question Beth had. If we want to add in an email while the engagement studio is running, for example, if we had a new webinar invite that was relevant to that audience, what's the best way to add that in when people could be at different stages of the engagement studio? Or would it simply be better to send a list email in that case?
Yeah, because people are all different stages. If we're trying to promote a webinar separately, what we could potentially do, because with things like that, we might want to send a few emails. So we might want to send emails in the run up to that date. And we can actually wait to send on a particular day. That's the wrong 1 second. They're all the same colour, it gets very confusing. So we can actually send on a date. So say for example, we were saying we've actually got this webinar on this date and we want to send them a couple of emails, and then maybe a few days before the webinar we want to say, here's your final reminder. Obviously a lot softer than that, but don't forget the event is in 3 days. We can actually send them through the engagement studio and everyone will wait until that date to then be sent it. And then in terms of them being in the other engagement studio, what we might want to do is say, okay, we want to focus on the webinar up until that point. So anyone on the webinar list, we're going to add as a suppression to the other engagement studio. As soon as the webinar is over, we're then going to remove that suppression list and everyone will continue to flow through that engagement studio.
Okay. Another question. We're currently using engagement studios for lead nurturing. What other use cases would be recommended? What is most effective to use? So I heard you saying something about anniversaries. Maybe there are more ideas there?
Yeah, so yeah, definitely for re-engagement is really useful for that. And like we were just saying, for events, in the run up to an event, if we want to promote something, if we've got a particular campaign that we're pushing as well, just any campaign that we want to send more than one email out for, but we want to actually see how people are interacting with them, and based on their behaviour, send them different things to follow up. It's really useful for any campaign really that involves more than one email. We don't actually have to use them for email. We can actually use them to, similar to an automation rule, but with more sort of criteria. If we wanted to, we don't have to send emails, but generally the main purpose is emails. But again, I can pop those in the documentation, just different ideas of campaigns that it's useful for.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I know. For example, in NER we also use it for new customers, a new customer program to engage new customers. So hopefully they will be sort of fans.
Yeah, definitely.
But, yeah, and for anniversary stuff, I know we also have used an automation rule, so that if a customer is with us for 15 years or 20 years, that he or she will get an email based on that automation rule, where we congratulate that customer about being with us for 15 years. Mm-hmm. We don't use Engagement Studio in this case, but I can also add that in the documentation just for some inspiration.
Yeah, of course, that's no problem. Yeah, I mean, there's no harm in using automation rules at all. It's just the limits to what we have. So if, for example, we get to the point where we're actually saying, okay, we've used the majority of our automation rules, we could then maybe revert that to Engagement Studio. So, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with using automation rules for a one-off send. It works just as well. So
yeah, good point that you mentioned about the limit of automation rules as well. Yeah. Okay. The last question I got from Louise: in the reporting for our engagement studios, the results don't appear in the same order as the emails are sent. So it is difficult to review progress at a glance without manually reordering the report. Is there something we can do in a setup to resolve this?
I'm not quite sure what she means by that. We've got two ways of reporting. We've got the actual report tab in Engagement Studio, which goes through the actual flow. and then we've got
Yep.
the individual email templates. So maybe it's because is she looking at the email template report as a whole rather than the individual. But if I show now, this is one that is already running, so I won't do anything but look at the report. But here we can start to see the individual. Clicked on the list by accident. That's the list of people that have been through it. Apologies. So we can start here to see the engagement of that particular email. So it gives us a glance of who's been sent, opens, click-through rate. But if we then want to actually delve into the email itself, we can start to see the report from here. So this is where we can set the timeline. So if we just do all time for the time being, this then gives us an overview of the actual email report. So in terms of looking at them within like the time frame that they would have gone out, the easiest way is probably to go through the engagement studio, because we know the order that they've been sent in.
And the numbers you see here, so for example, 824 opens, they are always the same if you go to the email template and choose all time, or are there differences?
They can be different because if we send a list email using that template, it will include the stats of that email as well. So we just need to make sure if we want it to be exact to that engagement studio, that we have literally only used that email template for that purpose. So if we do start to see differences, it is potentially because the template is being used elsewhere. And if the template is being used in 2 engagement studios as well, because that's possible.
Yeah, and I also know that we can download an Excel sheet, like a report for engagement studios. What is your best practice in how to check quickly the different engagement studios and the numbers in it?
I mean, let's go to reporting. So, I mean, we go. Just double checking that these are definitely engagement studios, because Pardot used to have drip programs.
Oh, yeah.
The same. Yeah, so these are actually drip programs, not engagement studios. Was this the report that you meant where we can export here?
No, I think, let me see. If I think you can download it when you go to the list of all the engagement studios, and then you probably can tick a button there and click on download a CSV file or an Excel file. Let me see.
Because we've got, that's to do with the individual, and then we've got edit, copy, delete. Let me check that for you, because I'm not aware of a report that pulls them all, but I'll find out for you, because
I know. When you are in a specific engagement studio, I remember now. So, for example, if you are in that IKEA, the one for Japan, the tab where your mouse is
this one here,
hovering. No, yeah, can also be another one. That's no problem. And then when you are in and you are in the reporting modus, then on the right side, you can see pause, and you can also see tools. So this is a draft, but I can see in your browser, the tab next to it has the engagement studio, which is already running.
Yes.
Yep. And then, oh, this is an email in it specifically, but if we go to the engagement studio.
Go back because I've gone too many tabs along. I'm just going to go and open this one again.
Yeah.
Too many tabs. Again, when this loads. So this is one that's live.
Yep.
So,
and then, yeah, I have the option when I click on tools to download a CSV export. Yeah. Yeah.
So that would be for this particular campaign, not all of them. Is that?
Yeah, only for this engagement studio. Yeah.
Apologies, I thought we were looking for a list of all of them together to see. Sorry.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah, so we can export this here. I won't export it now just for GDPR, just in case. But yeah, we can export this here from the report side.
And is that also the best practice to I think it's very easy to see within Excel the numbers there. But if you have other ideas or approaches how to see results and what is going well in an engagement studio, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on whether you want it to be visual or if you do just want the hard data, because obviously looking at this way, we can start to see which directions people are going in, what people are doing, that kind of thing. Whereas in the Excel sheet, it's not as easy to see that kind of activity, if that makes sense. So I think it depends on the individual really as to how they prefer to see the report. I personally would use the actual engagement studio and the email templates because I like to delve into the email itself and see what people are doing with it. So yeah, I think it would generally be down. Excuse me, I'm so sorry, I'm losing my voice. It would be down to the individual and how they prefer to report.
Yeah. Clear. Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
And when we are in this one at this moment, I also have the questions I've sent to you up front.
Yes.
Just to show everyone. Because yes, you explained in the beginning of this call, there are different possibilities to use to assign prospects to sales.
Yes.
So we can use grading, etc. This engagement studio is also using an approach, and I just wanted to show everyone how this approach is working. And I also wanted to show another approach. So here you can see the file download, and then on the right side, you can see change prospect and increment a specific field by one. So this is one approach, and to be able that sales will be activated, when you scroll down in the engagement studio, then you can see at a certain point that, because every time someone is downloading something, 1 point is added to a specific field. And in the end of the engagement studio, there is a rule there which checks, okay, for that specific field, is the number at least 4, then assigned to sales.
Just going to try and get to the end. It's quite a long one, this one.
Yeah.
That was clear. Apologies because it's so small.
Yeah, there are so many steps there.
Okay. So
let me see. Yeah, probably that is one of them.
So that's looking at the custom field to see basically, if it's going to go onto the field now, apologies. So it's looking for the value of that field. So this is almost taking the place of scoring, really. Whereas best practice would be to use scoring, just so we've got it all in one place, whether that's overall scoring or individual categories. That would be the ideal.
Yeah, well, good to know what is best practice. For now, we have this, well, as one of the approaches in Engagement Studio, so everyone understands a bit, hopefully, how this works. And another Engagement Studio is using scoring categories. So I also wanted to show that. Do you have that link as well, or do you want me to send the link?
Yeah, got it. Thank you. And here we go.
Okay.
Another big one.
Yeah. So here we actually are using scoring categories just so everyone understands a bit how it works, and you can always ask questions about it. So don't hesitate to contact me if you want to know more about it. But that's just so you have a first glance how it can work, first understanding. Here you have different emails, and we also have specific files for this campaign. So I thought we also had like, let me see, because we have email link clicks, but there are so many things there. I also remembered something about a file.
File download.
Yes, here it is. Okay. Here you can see, for example, file download within the campaign. And if you go to that specific file, so then you can see there that we use a scoring category, just as an example, because we will improve this globally in the end. But and we add 15 points when someone actually downloads the file. And if you then click on this scoring category, just to have an example. Yep. Then you can see all the different Pardot assets related to the scoring category. And you can also see an automation rule, the second one, which is running.
This one here.
Yes. Yeah. And if we click on that one, then you can see that, well, every time someone downloads something, he or she will get 15 points based on, that's organized within the file itself. And this automation rule looks for 74 points. So he or she needs to needs to have downloaded a lot of documents. And then when that's done, someone in sales is assigned. So this is another approach, just to show everyone what we can do, what the possibilities are. If you have questions, let me know, and also be aware that globally we, Natalie and me, will take a look at those scoring categories, of course, make them global. But I just wanted to explain it shortly so everyone can understand.
Perfect. So, was there anything else in this in either of these particular engagement studios that you shared earlier that you wanted to review?
Yeah, and I did have some questions about weighting, why choose up to a maximum of or weight, but you explained that in the beginning of this call, that it's useful to use the weight tick box usually. Here we are using up to 3 days, so Yeah, that can be difficult sometimes to understand. Okay, what would be better to use?
Sure.
The waiting
So
period.
in this particular example, this would actually work absolutely fine, because what we're saying is we're waiting, this is a hard wait of 8 days. So we've waited those full 8 days, have they opened it? And then we're saying, okay, we're going to give them up to 3 days to click. So that actually we would be pretty safe, because we know they've opened it, they've gone down this route, and we're just waiting to see if they've clicked. So if within those 8 days they reach this step and they have clicked, they'll immediately go down the yes route. If they haven't clicked by the 8 days, it'll wait up to another 3 days. If they do, it will continue, and if they don't, within those 3 days, it will then go down the no route. So if both of these were set to up to, it might go through far too quickly to actually register here and go down the no route. So that's why we want to at least have one hard wait step, which is this one here.
Okay, thank you.
No
It
problem.
makes it a bit more clear as well. Yes.
Perfect.
Sorry, it's Natalie speaking. Joel, maybe I missed that. Did you ask the question concerning the A/B testing?
No, not yet. No.
Oh, okay. So can I ask it now? Or?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So, in one of your previous sessions, Hannah, in the creating and sending email, you were mentioning the A/B testing.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, so will you mention that for instance, in the engagement studio, if we can try the A/B testing or not?
Of course. Yeah. So it's there's kind of a roundabout way of doing it. I'll just find the engagement studio that I was playing around with before. So, so if we just go to the end.
Because based on what you presented, I was wondering, what is the best practice to test? Because you mentioned that we can test different days to see which day could be better with the local audience. But that the subject and pre-heading texts are also the two topics really important.
Yes.
So in your experience, how many maximum items we should test in an A/B testing?
So in an A/B test, ideally we're only testing one factor. So if we want to test open rate, we would only change the subject line, or we would change the pre-header. We generally wouldn't change both. However, within that same email, if we want to say, okay, we're going to use the subject line to test open rate, but then we want to use the content to test click-through rate, we could then use a multivariate test for that. So we're just monitoring those two different statistics separately, but we would only change one thing. So maybe we're going to change the hero image in each email template. I'm going to say, okay, that's going to monitor clicks, and the subject line is going to monitor opens. So whereas we can have a variable for opens and a variable for clicks, we wouldn't have more than one for each. That makes sense.
Yes. Thank you.
So the way it's a bit of a roundabout way to do A/B testing in Engagement Studio. Apologies, there's a helicopter going over my house currently. If that's really loud, I'm sorry. I'll just wait a second. It seems to be getting louder rather than quieter. I apologise. I'll talk a little bit louder. So we basically will use lists, so we can have dynamic lists set up outside of the Engagement Studio, and there are two ways of doing it. The first, which isn't as random, shall we say, is we set up one dynamic list that looks for any prospect that has a surname beginning with A, C, E, alternate as we go through the alphabet. And then the second list is again dynamic, and that looks for B, D, F, and so on through the alphabet. Now that, in theory, splits people 50-50. So we might get to this point and we say, okay, we're going to look for if the list and let's just say this is list A, and we're going to say, okay, are they on this list? If they're not, we're going to send them this email. If they are, we're going to send them this email, and that's going to literally just split them down the middle, because obviously, well, in general, everyone's going to have a surname. Now, it's not as random as the alternative, which is in Salesforce, we can set up an assignment of numbers. So it's a process that goes on in the background, and it randomly assigns prospects with well, it'll assign it in Salesforce, and then when it syncs with Pardot, it will actually assign them a number. So this way will only work with people that are actually assigned to a user and have actually synced with Salesforce. But once they have, we can assign any number we want, really. We could do 1 to 10, and we could literally send 10 different variations and monitor 10 different subject lines. So what we would say is, are they on list 1, where that number equals 1? Send them this email. Are they on list 2, where the number equals 2? Send them the next email, and so on. And that way we could do lots of different tests all within the one engagement studio. So it's a little bit of a roundabout way of doing it, but it is a solution to the fact that Engagement Studio doesn't have an inbuilt A/B test.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll pop those in the documentation as well.
Yes, please.
Just to fully explain. But yeah, like I say, once those lists are set up, we've got them to use then moving forward. So we can just, if we do want to do the more simplified, just A/B based on surname, it's very quick to set up, and we can then just do that throughout the campaign. But we do need 2 separate email templates, one with subject A and one with subject B. But again, that's really quick. We just duplicate the email template and change the subject line.
Would you have also, in your experience, some tips to give on what's working well lately for the subject header and the pre-header text?
In general, I don't. So it really does depend on the business and the type of prospects that they have. My recommendation would, because it can change quite drastically. There are benchmark figures that get released each year from some sort of email experts, which they can help, but I personally would be swayed towards testing in-house and working from there rather than trying to work to a benchmark. And just, I haven't shared it yet, apologies, but there's some information in the documentation about testing and on the volumes that we have and the kind of results that we can start to see. So hopefully that will help in combination with this as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
No problem. So there was one thing I just wanted to make a note of on one of the running campaigns. Just going to open them up again just to remind myself which one it was. Was it this one? So yeah, this is one where the completion actions could have been added to the form, or so here we've got form completed and we've got these completion actions. We could actually just include these on the form rather than in here, and it would just mean that the Engagement Studio was a little easier to navigate. So that's just one thing to bear in mind. Just when we've got quite a large Engagement Studio, what what could we maybe use in different assets that we don't need to include in the program. So it's just easier to see what's happening when we're looking at the reporting. That was just a little one there.
Okay. Good. I can see people aren't at that stage yet, so we can still add those completion actions at this moment. But I can also see that 100% went to no in this example.
Yeah, so that's waited up
No.
to one day to see if they completed the form. Because that's another thing. If they don't complete the form within this time period and then they go down this route, if they then do complete the form at a later date, but the completion actions aren't on the form, these won't take place. So
yeah,
that's also worth bearing in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Was there any questions from anyone or anything that we've not covered?
No, I don't have any other questions next to the ones I had. But there's a lot we have talked about what also can be added to the guidelines, the Word document, of course. we did cover a lot of details. I don't know if someone else has a question at this moment.
No, thanks.
No.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure all 3 documents are ready by tomorrow, so you'll have everything by tomorrow to go over and share with the rest of the team.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks a lot again for the training, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Same to you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.